Welcome to the Blessors of Israel podcast. I'm Matthew Dodd, Executive Director of Blessors of Israel. On August 12, 2025, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu shared with Sharon Gal from I-24 News that he's very attached to the vision of, quote, a greater Israel. Now, the term Greater Israel was used after the Six-Day War of June 1967 to refer to Israel and the areas it had just conquered, which included East Jerusalem, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights. Gal further asked Netanyahu if he believes he's on a mission on behalf of the Jewish people. Netanyahu declared that he is, quote, on a mission of generations. There are generations of Jews that dreamt of coming here, and generations of Jews who will come after us. Netanyahu continued, so if you're asking if I have a sense of mission, historically and spiritually, the answer is yes. Netanyahu's comments touch upon one of the most hotly debated topics concerning Israel, specifically the question of Israel's claim to the land it currently occupies. This question has received even greater press after Netanyahu announced on August 10th his plan to end the war with Hamas, along with his plan for the Gaza Strip the day after Hamas is defeated. Netanyahu summarized his 5 principles for concluding Israel's war with Hamas as follows. 1. Hamas is disarmed. 2. All hostages are freed. 3. Gaza is demilitarized. 4. Israel has overriding security control. And 5. Gaza will be governed by a non-Israeli peaceful administration. By that, Netanyahu means a civilian administration that doesn't educate its children for terror, that doesn't pay terrorists, and doesn't launch a terrorist attack against Israel. So, it's neither Hamas or the Palestinian Authority that will rule over Gaza after Gaza is freed from Hamas. Now, on the international front, there has been significant opposition and, frankly, outrage towards Netanyahu's plan. Additionally, France, Australia, Canada, and the United Kingdom, nations who have historically claimed to be Israel's allies, have recently stated that they will recognize a Palestinian state at the United Nations General Assembly in September of this year. But keep in mind, while men fret and nations scheme about this issue, what is needed is the counsel from God's Word, the Bible. It is clear that God has something to say about Israel's borders. What are the borders that God determined for Israel? Recently, I shared on episode 93 of the Blessors of Israel podcast, a podcast titled, Does God Approve of a Two-State Solution? In that podcast, I noted that in Genesis 15, God established a grant covenant with Abram, which means God bound himself by an oath to unilaterally and unconditionally give the land to Abram and his descendants forever. In verse 18, God declared what the borders of the promised land would be. Quote, on that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your descendants I have given this land, from the river Egypt as far as the great river, the river Euphrates. God later confirmed the promised land borders to Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 6 through 8, and then again to Joshua in Joshua chapter 1, verse 4. Let's identify the borders that God promised to Israel through his covenant with Abram in Genesis 15. The western boundary is the Great Sea, which is the Mediterranean Sea, according to Joshua chapter 1, verse 4. The southern border is the Nile River in Egypt. The eastern border is the Euphrates River, and the northern border is Lebanon. Now, in today's context, what countries would be included in the borders that God determined for Israel in Genesis 15? First, the the West Bank and the Gaza Strip are both included. Second, a portion of Egypt to the south is included. Third, some of Saudi Arabia to the southeast is included. Fourth, all of Jordan to the east is included. Fifth, a portion of Iraq is included to the east. Sixth, some of Syria to the north. Lebanon as well to the north, and possibly the southeastern portion of Turkey as you follow the Euphrates River north by northwest. So when you put it all together, this means that God's plan for Israel's borders is far greater than Netanyahu's vision of a greater Israel. Question: has Israel ever fully occupied the boundaries determined by God in Genesis 15? The answer is no. Some of the regions were controlled by King David and King Solomon, but they were never fully possessed or occupied by Israel. Question: why didn't Israel fully occupy the Promised Land according to the borders of Genesis 15? Answer: because Israel failed to obey God's command and allowed her enemies to remain in the Promised Land, which ultimately tempted them to sin against God by worshiping idols. Question: will Israel's borders ever extend to what God promised Abram in Genesis 15? Answer: yes. Please remember that since God bound himself by an oath, his promise to Abram must be fulfilled, and it will be fulfilled when Jesus Christ returns to establish his millennial kingdom. During Jesus Christ's 1,000-year reign, the Promised Land will experience peace, tranquility, and blessings as Jesus reigns on the throne of David, in keeping with God's promise to David in 2 Samuel chapter 7. So one day, in the millennial kingdom of Jesus Christ, God's plan for a greater Israel will be fully realized because God is faithful to keep all of his promises. God said it, so he will do it. Thank you for joining me today. To receive the latest news concerning Israel, along with biblical commentary, I want to encourage you to visit our website at www.blessors.org. That's Blessors with an ORS.org. There you will discover our vision and our mission statement as an organization. I also want to encourage you to visit our newsroom, because there in our newsroom you'll see curated news concerning Israel and the Middle East, because we want you to be the best informed as to how to stand and pray for Israel in these latter days. Also, make sure to follow us on Facebook, X, and Getter. And if you haven't done so already, please make sure you like this podcast and subscribe to this channel. Well, we appreciate your prayers, and we also appreciate your financial partnership during this critical time. Thanks again for joining me today. Remember, those who bless Israel will be blessed. Shalom, shalom.